the M47 and M46 tanks, the patent featured advanced fire control that gave it nearly a 50% chance of a first-round hit at 1,500 meters, a reduction in crew from 5 to 4, and a hemispherical turret that gave excellent crew protection. The downside of the M48 was a mediocre 90mm main gun and appallingly bad range, 70 miles. Despite these mixed reviews, the patent was rushed into production in 1953. In 1956, British intelligence acquired information regarding the new Soviet T-55 medium tank. A radical departure from the wartime T-34 series, the T-55 featured the D-10T 100mm rifled gun. This new threatened to outgun NATO armies whose tanks were largely equipped with 90mm guns, and as a result, the United Kingdom developed the 105mm L-7 gun. Known as the M-68 in American service, integrating the gun into the Army's tank fleet became a high priority. Unfortunately, the L-7 gun was not only larger than the standard 90mm gun but used larger shells. This necessitated a turret redesign to accommodate the new gun, which increased the internal volume of the turret while giving it a lower profile. The Army also threw in a new 750 horsepower diesel engine and also improved the level of protection in the form of flat-rolled glassy armor on the front of the hull. The new tank was designated M-60 and began rolling off production lines in 1960. Some 15,000 M-60s of all types rolled off assembly lines in Detroit, Michigan. The first upgrade to the M-60 line, the M-60A1, introduced a new turret-mounted spotlight, new turret interior with improved ergonomics, an infrared night vision system, and an improved reliability engine. Both M-60 and M-60A1s were sent to Israel to arm the Israeli Defense Forces, and were designated Magog 6 and 7, respectively. IDF M-48 Pattons and M-60s performed well during the 1973 Yom Kippur War, but suffered heavy losses when tanks outpaced infantry and ran into Egyptian anti-tank teams fielding 83 Sagar anti-tank missiles. The Israelis also discovered that the M-60's highly pressurized turret hydraulic fluid tended to catch fire, a major hazard to crews bailing out of damaged tanks. The Army's quest to develop a tank with leap-ahead anti-tank technologies led to the second M-60 variant, the M-60A2. The A2 replaced the gun and turret of the A1 with a redesigned turret and a 152mm gun missile launcher. This would allow the M-60A2 to engage enemy tanks at long distances with the Shillelagh anti-tank missile, allowing for a high probability of hit at ranges of up to 3,000 meters, while using 152mm gun shells for closer range and lightly armored targets. Unfortunately, the gun/missile launcher proved unreliable, as the recoil from firing the gun shells wreaked havoc with the missile launcher's sensitive electronics. The caseless design of the gun rounds also expelled hot debris inside the tank, threatening to detonate rounds held at the ready. The M-60A2 was not considered a success, with only 600 built and serving for a short time with the U.S. Army Europe before being withdrawn from service. The last U.S. version of the M-60, the A3, was fielded in 1978. The M-60A3 was primarily an upgrade of the tank's electronics and fire control systems, as was meant as a stopgap improvement for M-60 units until they were ultimately replaced by the M1 Abrams. The A3 upgrade included a new ballistic computer, an improved fire control system that allowed the main gun to fire accurately on the move, and a laser rangefinder. However, the greatest improvement was the NVSG-2, otherwise known as the Tank Thermal Sight, which gave the M-60 a passive night vision thermal imaging capability as good as that on the new M1. In the early 1980s, as the U.S. Army was distracted with the deployment of the brand new Abrams tank, development of the M-60 shifted to Israel. The 1982 Israeli invasion of Lebanon saw IDF M-60s roll out with a number of improvements, including one of the earliest examples of explosive reactive armor, a 60mm mortar for nighttime battlefield illumination, and a second machine gun for suppressing enemy anti-tank missile teams. Perhaps most important of all were the Israeli-designed M111 arrow-armored piercing, fin-stabilized discarding sub-O round for the L7 gun, which demonstrated its ability to pierce the armor of Syrian T-72 tanks thought to be invulnerable. Israel claimed to have destroyed 9 T-72s in Lebanon with the arrow round. The arrow was subsequently purchased by West Germany, South Africa, and China. The end of the Cold War saw the U.S. Army eliminate its fleet of M-60s entirely in favor of the M1 series of main battle tanks. The U.S. Marine Corps was slower transitioning to a modern tank fleet, and during the 1991 Persian Gulf War was still operating M-60A1 tanks. Fears that the Marines' older tanks would be outclassed by Iraqi T-72 tanks led to U.S. Army Armored Brigade equipped with M1A1 tanks to be attached to the 1st Marine Division, although the Marine M60A1S ended up performing well. Although the M60 no longer serves with U.S. forces, it still serves around the world in countries such as Turkey, Morocco, Saudi Arabia, Taiwan and Egypt, often in an upgraded capacity. In one case, Israeli companies conducted extensive upgrades to Turkish M60s, including an Israeli-designed 120mm gun, a new fire control system, applique armor, and new running gear, bring them up to the M60T, Turkey, status. In 2016, Raytheon announced the M60A3 Service Life Extension Program, which added the 120mm M256 gun of the M1A2 Abrams and a new, all-digital fire control system developed for the U.S. Army. Engine output has been increased 200 horsepower to 950 horsepower. The M60 tank was a classic example of how a progressive system of upgrades can keep a weapon system viable for a half-century or more. While the M60 was an early case of this, as time goes by the majority of the Pentagon's hardware is taking this route, as the M16 rifle